Linh, a child of mixed heritage, grew up believing she was an orphan with no father, no mother, raised only in the arms of her grandmother. She never asked much, and no one ever gave her clear answers to the quiet questions in her heart. But after getting married, Linh began to long for the truth. Where did I come from? Who brought me into this world? Then one day, her grandmother, through tears, revealed the secret she had kept for decades. Linh was not an orphan. She had both a mother and a father. The woman she thought was her adoptive mother was, in fact, her real mother. And her father was an American soldier. From that moment on, Linh's journey to search for her roots truly began. 53 years believing she was an orphan, a Vietnamese-American woman finds her U.S. soldier father. Back in the 1970s, a love story quietly blossomed between a young Vietnamese woman and a U.S. soldier. Jim Heinz had enlisted at just 18, following in his family's tradition of military service. In August 1970, he was deployed to Vietnam, serving in a platoon of 12 men. At the time, the unit hired local women to help with cooking, cleaning, and housework. That's where Jim first met Ton, one of the young women working there. They were both so young then, Jim a handsome, rugged teenager, Ton only 18, with a beauty as pure and radiant as the full moon. It didn't take long for sparks to fly, and the two quickly fell for each other. Jim recalls with a soft smile, "We were just kids, innocent and naive, but we had that one weekend together." The romance didn't last long. Just a year after he first arrived, Jim was sent back to the U.S., carrying with him the memories of a love left unfinished. Ton, however, was left behind with a heart full of sorrow. Her pain only deepened when she realized she was carrying a child Jim would never even know about. 7 months after Jim's departure, Ton gave birth to a baby girl. She named her Linh. But in those days, being an unwed mother was already a heavy burden, and giving birth to a mixed-race child made life even harder. To protect the family from shame and hardship, Ton and her mother made a heartbreaking decision. They would hide the truth. Linh's grandmother told Ton never to admit Linh was her daughter. Instead, they would say she was adopted. And so Linh grew up under her grandmother's roof, believing she was only an adopted child. For years, the secret stayed buried. Even Linh herself had no idea who she truly was. At just 22 years old, Ton tragically passed away, leaving behind her little daughter, a child with no father and now no mother. Linh was raised by her grandmother, who gave her love and care, but she grew up believing she was an orphan who had simply been adopted. It wasn't until Linh got married that her grandmother finally revealed the truth. The revelation left Linh deeply emotional. She felt no anger toward her mother or grandmother, and no bitterness toward the father she had never met. Instead, she was grateful that her mother and grandmother had protected her and never abandoned her. As for her father, she longed to find him, and to experience the father-daughter bond she had always dreamed of. Through newspaper articles, Linh learned about DNA websites that could help reconnect families separated by war. She uploaded her DNA, hoping it might lead her to her father. But years went by with no news. Just as she was losing hope, in September 2017, something remarkable happened. By chance, Mikal, Jim Heinz's daughter from his current marriage, also submitted her family's DNA online. To her astonishment, Mikal discovered she had an older half-sister in Vietnam. At the time, Jim was living a happy life in the U.S. with his wife Jerry, unaware that a long-lost connection was about to resurface. When Jim first learned the truth, he was stunned. He had never known he had another daughter in Vietnam. His family was supportive and encouraged him to reconnect with Linh, but the memories of the war still haunted him. The thought of returning to Vietnam filled him with fear. It wasn't until Linh's 17-year-old daughter and Jim's granddaughter spoke to him that everything changed. Jim recalled, "Nu told me her mother's only wish was for me to come, so she could finally prove to everyone that she was not alone, that she had a family just like anyone else. At that moment, I knew I had to go back. I had to see her." Overcoming his fears, Jim finally returned to Vietnam to meet the daughter he had never known.
We're here.
On the day of the reunion, Linh sat anxiously in a small restaurant with her husband and daughter, waiting. When Jim and his wife Jerry walked in, it was as if an invisible bond pulled them together. Father and daughter fell into each other's arms, sobbing. Linh, like a little girl again, buried her face into her father's chest. Even Jerry, Jim's wife, could not hold back her tears. That heartfelt reunion changed everything. Jim decided he wanted Linh and her family to live with him in the United States. In the first week of June 2018, Linh, her husband, and her daughter landed at the airport, finally joining Jim's family. They were welcomed with open arms. Linh met relatives she had never known, and soon after, the family celebrated with a backyard barbecue filled with laughter, joy, and love, the kind of family moment Linh had always dreamed of.